There was a George Floyd update in the nightly evening news today. Today's July 8th, I think, 2020. And it basically goes to what I have been saying since the beginning of June. This was Murder-1. Everyone's afraid to call it Murder-1, but it was Murder-1. And I started a petition on change.org. It actually was doing pretty good, except that because change.org had another petition that was a few days earlier than mine, a more generic petition about George Floyd that ended up with like 15 million signatures, that it kind of overwhelmed their system. So they never sent out my updates. When you, as petition signers, sign and you do an update, they get sent to your people who already signed. And mine never went out. I did like 7 updates, and I finally gave up. I go, you know, if I'm doing all these updates and they're not being sent out, it kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. Not totally, because it turns out they're actually on Google. You can actually Google Murder-1, George Floyd, and I think my petition will come up potentially on the first page, especially if you put petition. So it got over 1,000 signatures, which is great, you know, I mean, but I think it could have done a lot better. But it's still up and open. And let me just hit on pause for a second.
Lester?
Okay, if I don't hit on pause, I'll actually lose the signal and I won't be able to get it back. It's a long story. So basically, here's the thing. This is why, and I know people are afraid of Murder-1 because they're afraid, oh, what if the jury says it's not Murder-1, then he walks or whatever. Well, I think you can give options. I think you can do Murder-1, Murder-2, Murder-3, and even manslaughter and let the jury decide. I don't know how many options you can give. Unfortunately, I never was able to find that out. But I think you can give 2 murder options and also manslaughter. But here's the bottom line. Right now, if we follow what we believe the law to be, it means that a police officer can never commit Murder-1. Because if a police officer is always answering a call, then the argument is, well, it couldn't be premeditated because he just answered a call. So no matter what the officer does in the line of duty for that call, it can never be Murder-1. Because for it to be premeditated, he would have had to plan it ahead of time. But I believe there's an exception to this rule, and it would be if you're not meditating, you're premeditated. So I believe that basically the officer had enough warnings from George Floyd, from all the witnesses, even from his own knees on his neck as he felt him stop straining. He knew he had to back off, and he chose not to. He chose to not meditate what to do next. That put him in a premeditated state of mind. And I think that's the argument right there. On top of that, let me just unpause it for a second and repause it.
All right, Joe Ling, thank you tonight.
Okay. The other thing is, too, if you go to Minnesota law, it turns out there's special circumstances for Murder-1 that involve, like if there's other felony issues. For instance, I think this was felony disturbing the peace, because the peace was disturbed as people were crying out for him to stop killing this man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and he didn't listen. That's disturbing the peace. It also, if you go to my petition, I haven't looked at it in a few days, I had another reason too that also followed the same thought process. It's all there. You can scan through. I wrote like 7 updates, and I think it's all there. I think Murder-1 should be on the table. We cannot have a system of laws where just because you put on a uniform, you get indemnity from Murder-1. Because that's really what the law is right now. And I think it can be challenged that on the basis that if you're not meditating, you're premeditated. And because it took so long, because it took 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that was plenty of time for the police officer to reconsider what he was doing and to meditate a new course of action. And he chose not to. And that's why I believe it's Murder-1. Anyway, I'm going to play a little bit of this since I did most of the talking.
Seeing this evening, new transcripts from Minneapolis police body cams of the final moments of George Floyd's life. They reveal Floyd told the officers restraining him he couldn't breathe for more than 20 times. At one point, Floyd cries out for his late mother, saying, quote, "I love you, tell my kids I love them, I'm dead." The transcripts were filed by attorneys for one of the 4 former officers charged in that case. Growing outrage in Indiana is sparking protests and demands for...
Anyway, Murder 1. Put it on the table. I think it's Murder 1. I think there's a, don't put it on Murder 1 in such a way where he then can walk. If the jury doesn't think it's Murder 1, ask the judge. Judge, we think this is special circumstances for Murder 1. We'd like to offer it and let the jury decide if they think it's Murder 1. But if they think it's just going to be Murder 2 or Murder 3 or manslaughter, that's fine too. But we want them to have the option of Murder 1. And again, the argument, just because you put on a uniform and you're called to a location does not mean that at every single incident you cannot be premeditated. Because that's how everybody's interpreting premeditation. They're saying, well, if you didn't plan on killing that person before you arrived on the scene, then it can't be premeditated. 8 minutes and 46 seconds says otherwise. Just the constant begging of all the people involved to just lay off on the guy, to put him on his side, to do anything but what he was doing was ignored. That means he wasn't meditating. He was premeditated in his decision, and no matter what he felt from the person below him, he was not going to change course. And if he, quote, was struggling, as the people who say, oh, he's not even going to be convicted on murder because he was struggling, he stopped struggling. It's obvious he stopped struggling, because if he hadn't stopped struggling, he wouldn't have been able to keep his knees on him with his arms in to keep his balance, to put even more force on his neck. So please sign my petition. It's just George Floyd Murder-1. It's on change.org. And let's at least make a voice for Murder 1. And that's it.